Kriya Jati, Parvata Kriya Jati, but Bahima Parvata is not there. So, more examples of upadhis like Lambamana Nila Ghatatva. Ghatatva is a jati, Nila is a jati. But Lambamana Nila Ghatatva, all those pots which are lying in a reclined position and they are blue in color, that is not a natural way to bring all these blue pots together. Right, so Mukhara Pashakatva. You see that Mukharatva and Pashakatva may be jatis, but Mukhara Pashakatva is not a jati. So these are a lot of cooks are imposed property of their Muslims there, and several pots under the property of being blue in color there, reclaimed positions. This imposed mode of classification. And any process of assorting or compounding general terms into determinate structure rests on a cognition of simpler constituents. And ultimately, the simplest constituent would resist any further analysis, and that simplest constituent will be jati. And the upadhis will be the compounds of these simplest constituents. And that also shows the absolute independence of the jati. You see that the jati does not fall back on the particulars. That the Nyayavisheshikas say that the jatis are cognized through Divikalpa Pratyaksha. When you have this cognition, this is a pot. You not only have the indeterminate perception of this, unqualified by any property, but you also have indeterminate perception of potness, not qualifying, not belonging to anybody. So that shows the absolute independence of the nature of jati. And that is also another way of appreciating its simplicity. And here I want to say that, see, had potness, khatatva, being assorted out of simpler parts like the neck, body, base, then you see you would have been able to cognize the same neck as being repeatable in a jug, the same base as recurring in a pitcher, and the same body bulge as resurfacing in a kettle. But that is not the case. Khatatva to be a jati should be an indissoluble, immaculate blend of its parts, where you cannot, see the part repeating itself in a jug or a pitcher or something like that. So that makes its irreducibility, that constitutes the akhanda character of jati. Whereas you see the upadhis like Baliman Parvatatva, Lambamana Nila Ghatatva, Mukhara Pashakatva, these will be compound. Because you can easily, kind of distract, you can easily extract the Mukharatva from a Pachaka and see it in other individuals who are not Pachaka. So Mukhara Pachakatva does not have the indissoluble simplicity of a jati, and that is why it is not a natural class sense, it is an imposed contingent mode of generalization. So, Udayana says that jatis are swabhavika anagantukara. So that constitutes the non-imposed, the non-contingent, absolutely essential characteristic of the jatis. Another very important thing that jatis inhere samaveta in the particulars, whereas upadhis they are not samaveta in the particulars, swarupa sambandha. And swarupa sambandha, without going into details, I can say, see, the Banni which is being conjoined with a hill. So when you bring lots of hills together under Banniman Parvatatva. Now the Banni of hill 1 and the Banni of hill 2, Banni of hill 3, these are separate. It is not the same Bannitva which is bringing all these hills together. Bannitva is bringing the fires together, but Banniman is not bringing the hills together. The Banni of hill 1 and the Banni of hill 2, the Banni of hill 3, they are separate. So this is the other very important difference between jati and upadhi. And now I'm comparing the upadhis with the contingent states of affairs. So you see that the varying states of affairs actually are possible will refer back to objects. Just as the upadhis refer back to jatis, Banniman Parvatatva, Lambamana Nila Ghatatva, all these refer back to jatis, Bannitva, Parvatva. Similarly, continuous states of affairs, they will have to refer back to the necessarily existent objects. So that is the analogy I am trying to draw. One thing is about the ontological status of the objects. See, they are particulars, they are not properties. There may be simple properties. For example, Russell has talked about simple universals, but in Wittgenstein, you see, the objects are particulars and they are simple particulars. They are not properties because properties are explicitly stated to be formed out of the combination of the objects. So objects themselves are properties. And secondly, you see, there are lots of arguments regarding that, but I'll just say the minimum. And objects are not bare particulars. But the thing is that you cannot speak of the objects having properties because that will make the objects complex. But the objects' properties are internal properties which cannot be stated but they can only be shown. So that's a very interesting point that the committees have suggested that number, extension, figurative motion, these are the showable properties, internal properties of the object. And you can speak of what you can describe an object having a particular volume, you can describe an object having a particular extension, have a particular motion, but extension, motion, etc., these are not stateable. These are showable. Just as numericity is showable. You cannot state that these objects are 2 in number or 3 in number, but the numericity is shown in the numericity of the symbols themselves. So that is the kind of that I hope that I have conservated the analogy. So we can go to upadhis. A very interesting aspect of upadhis is guided cross divided. The sankara. They are sankara properties. What is meant to be sankara properties? To be sankara or to be intersected means that they are co-present in certain loci but mutually excluded in certain other loci. For example, you say that okay, I'll form a group by putting all the men who are wearing caps into one group. And of course that is not a jati. And that is not a sankara, because you see, in certain loci, you find the cap and the men together. Certain other loci, you will have the man without the cap, and certain other loci, you will have cap without the man. So that makes a sankara. It is co-present in certain loci, and they are mutually absent in certain other loci. That is what is called sankara, or that is what is called overlapping or intersecting properties. So upadhis, mostly the upadhis are also sankara. And Udahana gives a very interesting example of sankara, is nishkramanatva and praveshanatva. See, when you are from the streets, you enter into a house, then there is praveshanatva. Then you go out of the house into the streets, there is praveshanatva. So, you have certain rules when one praveshanatva is there, nishkramanatva is not there, and vice versa. But again, in certain acts, when you go from one room and to another room, the same action has 2 aspects. That is, both nishkramanatva and praveshanatva. So Udayana says that these 2 are upadhis, they're sankara, and some other commentators say no. Every action, when you enter into a particular space, thereby you also exit from a particular space. So every action has 2 aspects, that is nishkramanatva and praveshanatva. So a very interesting mistake can occur. Like for example, when we can mistake sankarya to be a jati. That whenever a compound property, we don't appreciate that, okay, it is compound and we think to be a jati. Similarly, the opposite mistake happens that when there is a jati, you are not being able to recognize it. You think that it is actually a compound. Like for example, H2. Somebody may think that, okay, these are 2 loose conjunction of hydrogen and oxygen. So H2O will be just a 2-party. But that a new emergent, new species, a new essence that H2O is, people may not be able to recognize that. So sometimes you see, the simplicity is also not properly appreciated. Simplicity is mistaken, for compounding. So for the crossbreds, we have all these tigers, camellia, then monotremes, hermaphrodites. How to take them? It is contentious because you see whether you say with every crossbreed, in the vertical system, every crossbreed that is a tiger, camellia, you see the number of the jatis will go on increasing. With every crossbreed, number of jatis will go on increasing. If you think that with every crossbreed you have an emergence of a new jati, new instantiation, so some Mayaikas will not be ready to accept that. They will say, no. See, when you say a platypus has 2 characteristics. One is the mammalian character, and one is the reptilian character. The mammalian character of platypus, plant to platypus 2, they will be all tropes. And tropes are not jatis, Buddhas are not jatis. So, they will say it's like, a platypus having a mammalian character and also reptilian character, like having a color and a smell. So, they are co-present. And color and smell, they are tropes. So, that is another interpretation of there being, whether certain crossbreeds are to be taken as jatis or upadhis. So, and Tractarian taken crossbreeds, you remember that Tractatus says that a new property cannot be discovered. Every combination, every possible combination of objects, every possible new emergence unthought of emergence of combination is already grouped in the logical space of the object. So that will be the Tractarian take on the cross brains. So now the main point is that how much time do I have?
15, 10.
How?
10,
10 minutes more?
10, 15 minutes.
Oh, so I have a lot of time. Okay. So we
10, 15 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes.
5 to 6 minutes, that's what I but okay. So the crucial question that emerges is that just as the theories of Jati Badhakas as well as states of affairs only serve to fortify the underlying essence of a more rigorous framework. So would we say that later Wittgenstein's attack on essences will be meaningful only as being grounded on essence in some form or other? So will that essentialist pressure be, kind of working on Wittgenstein? Now, of course, we have these, remember the family resemblances, crisscrossing or the overlapping properties. Now, essentialists will say, look, this is not a critique of essence. What you have presented as Wittgenstein is simply certain circular properties. Circular properties because of the game and, family. You see in certain games there is skill in luck, there is winning and losing, and they are co-present in some cases. In certain other games you have skill in luck without winning and losing. In certain other games you are winning and losing without skill in luck. So you just have a Sankarya here. And hypothesis, it does not jeopardize essences anyway. So just two examples of, family and games is not enough to critique essences. But Wittgenstein, later Wittgenstein has other examples too. He has a very resourceful critique of absolute simplicity. And he says that, let us go to examples, for a table. For a carpenter, a table is composed of standard parts, the platforms, legs, drawers, etc. For a physicist, it's the cluster of atoms and molecules. A tribal who is innocent of the logistic of furniture will be only interested to randomly extract the chunks of wood from the table and to cook his food. And if he happens to be a dwarf, he will be prone to conceive the table as a sphere. This famous example given by Chomsky is destined to be seen as a dwarf's bed. So lastly, one can even look upon it as an unanalyzable design whose structure is not supposed to serve any purpose. Some more examples. From one point of view, a visual image of a tree can be a complex of color patches. From another point of view, it is a broken outline composed of straight bits. A chessboard can be looked upon as a compound of 32 white squares and 32 black squares. Alternatively, very interestingly, Wittgenstein states it can be also looked upon as being made of shapeless white and black, not square shapes, not square black and white, but shapeless white and black colors, and a colorless one-dimensional schema of squares. So these are the symbols in the ordinary motive analysis. Now, what would the essentialist strategy is to say that, okay, pull Wittgenstein back again to essentialism, pull him back to pragmatism. What would be the strategy? So the essentialists, they can still object that it is never that a single object undergoes different modes of conceptualization or utilization. When the apparent sameness of a table or a tree is seen to undergo differences, actually this phenomenon boils down to different sets of atomic facts, that is concatenation of different objects. So that is the purpose of the Tractarian statements. The above examples of the divine modes of conception, they will only flare up more and more symbols with more and more modes of combination. But in no case the innate simplicity of the symbol will be violated. Similarly, with I will just give one example. Take this Nishkramanatma and Praveshma. You say that, okay, you see the same action under two aspects. But that is not, attacking the essence, because the essence will be what? The action, the karmatva. The karmatva will be a self-identical, invariable, essence. And that will be having two variant aspects. Fine. So this, just as the Upadhi, Sankarya aspects, see, these don't jeopardize jati, these don't jeopardize essences. Now, how will later Wittgenstein outgrow this essentialist, kind of reversal? So, later Wittgenstein's reactions against absolute simplicity and absolute complexity that doesn't consist in simply floating diverse modes of analysis. Rather, it is an exposure as to how, within each mode of analysis, the proposed symbols fail to preserve their simplicity. The tree is seen as a complex of several curves. Each curve itself can be seen as composed of an ascending and descending segment. The color of a square on a chessboard is simple, but it can also be seen as consisting of pure white and pure yellow. White is not simple. Is white simple, or does it consist of colors of a rainbow? More interesting example, is this length 2 centimeters simple, or does it consist of 1 bit 3 centimeter long and 1 bit 1 centimeter long measured in the opposite direction? So, and the most important point is the internal rupture of the features. Within each mode of conception, the apparent simples are actually invaded by the complex. For instance, the chessboard, conceived of a composite of 32 white squares and 32 black squares. Alternately, colors black and white is scheme of squares. See, on the second alternative, it is not that you have two simples, that one is colors black and white and the other is a scheme of squares. And then you simply combine them in linear model. Because why it is so, I will read it out. In the second alternative, the identity of the schema of squares as to what constitutes its outer frame, what constitutes its slots, what constitutes the color of the frame itself is different from the filling colors. These so-called simples, they progressively unfold through each move of filling out of the frame. On the first alternative, what constitutes the boundary line of each square, what constitutes the exact extent of the third dimension, they are actually fleshed out through each act of being readjusted and reshaped in the process of being combined with other squares. This shows that none of the alternative modes of conception is a linear assortment of the respective set of symbols, but within each being, the simple and the complex, they penetrate into each other. So here a reminder, so let me claim that this depth of later Wittgenstein's anti-essentialism was perhaps not appreciated by the Nyaya Vaisheshika. So striking a chord between the two unmatched systems, as I was trying to compare between essentialism of Tacitus and essentialism of Vaisheshika, that had been difficult. Because these two are very different systems, but still I was trying to kind of build some kind of congruence between the two. But in the second stage, that was more difficult, relieving later Wittgenstein from the overpowering constraints of an alien scheme of essentialism. This as essential. And I have to, and there, relieving later Wittgenstein from the overpowering constraints of Vaisheshika essentialism, and not only from his own version. That requires a more intricate labor, and I think that you appreciate that. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Mitro, for your beautiful and in-depth presentation. Now, we have Professor S. Manish Selvan to comment on the paper presented by Dr. Mitro. So, may I request Sarita,
thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor. Am I visible to you?
Yes. Yeah, I can see you, sir. You can put your question from there.
Thank you, Professor Nakshi, for a wonderful presentation. Definitely your paper has got some very important insights, which I was thinking, and I felt that this paper should be a model for a comparative study. Now, very beautifully, and in fact I have come across very few scholars who have made such attempt using Nyaya Vaisheshika paradigm to understand. Why can't you sit, madam?
No,
I feel very...
No, that's right, yeah.
There are only very few scholars in India who could make such a comparison between Nyaya Vaisheshika with the earlier and later Wittgenstein. So I was amazed to read your paper. I was reading it number of times. Today morning also I was concentrating. Okay. So,
any questions, sir?
yeah, I'm coming. Now, you have used a paradigm. Now, on the one side, we have Jati and Upadi. This is Nyaya Vaisheshika paradigm. On the other side, we have Wittgenstein, that is the paradigm of the essence as well as accident. Now, one major problem which I faced with regard to the accident or accidental this thing which I used from the later point of view, later Wittgenstein point of view, is little disturbing to me for the main reason that the later period is nothing but the rejection of the essence, no doubt. But it does not develop a sort of accidental approach. Because no, he leaves everything to the society, that is the reason why he says the meaning emerges from the society. So why do you use this the word accident or accidental with regard to the later Wittgenstein in contrast with the essence? This is my first objection. First concern. Then, with regard to Nyaya paradigm, the concept of jati, of course, has been playing a very important role. But you see, in order to understand the jati or the universal, you need the particulars also. Without the particulars, you cannot understand the significance of jati. That is the reason why we say, why later Nyayikas talk about the universalized particular. Right? So, how do you completely differentiate these two? How can we say that the jatis or the upadhis are entirely different from that of jati? Why this shift, or why this problem? Why this distinction between these two? And secondly, that is very beautifully you have analyzed the state of affairs. This state of affairs, as Wittgenstein very clearly says, I would like to quote him. He says a state of affairs is a combination of objects. So it is a combination of names. So in our day-to-day life, it is the combination of names which produce object. Right? So every object has a corresponding name, and every name corresponds to its object which it designates. So how do we say that it could be different from the other? That is what you have talked about. In other words, I would like to state, rephrase the whole thing like this. The object make up the substance of the world. That is the reason why they cannot be considered as composite. So the distinction between the individual objects, or say separate objects, so the question of composite perhaps is a little problematic in Wittgenstein approach. And secondly, I feel that now you are talking about the upadhis, and you said upadhi is a condition with reference to one. It is purely particular, you argue. But there you use the word, the imposed generality. Now this imposed generality, it is problematic, because where do we exactly impose this generality? Because I feel that there cannot be the universal or jati as this a specific notion, because the imposed generality is a term which is a little problematic in Nyaya as well as in Wittgenstein this thing. Then one more point which I would like to point out is the meaning is something which emerges. Nyaya paradigm is something remarkable, no doubt. But if you look at the later Wittgenstein, with the Nyaya paradigm, I would say that Wittgenstein would come very close to the earlier Wittgenstein, not the later Wittgenstein. Because the presupposition that is involved in your presentation is you are keeping the two apart. So what is that? One side you have the essence, on the other side you have the accident. So this is a little problematic, and I would like to know from you, how would you apply that in the later Wittgenstein case? This is my major concern. Thank you.
Should I respond?
Thank you. So may I request the presenter to please give the response. Ma'am, in brief, please.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Wittgenstein, for your wonderful, insightful questions. Yeah, first is that in later Wittgenstein, I perhaps did not consciously speak of accidents in case of later Wittgenstein, because for Wittgenstein, since there is no distinction between essence and accident. Since there is no essence, there is no meaningful way in which you can contrast essence with accidents. And with him, you see so-called necessary statements, he will be giving different treatment of identity statements or contradictory statements. If I just will make a few remarks, like when you say that, the rod has, every rod has a length. Here, this identity statements which Berkeley speak essentially is a kind of language game where you actually kind of project the same thing coming out, it's a kind of dispersal reversal of two crossing prisms and 7 lights going out, dispersing and again reverting back to it. So it's a kind of imaginative language game which constitutes necessary statements and senses. So I did not speak of essence versus accident in case of Jacob Wittgenstein. I'll speak more about it if I get time now about jati, unique particulars. But the Vaisheshik is at least the old Nyaya. The old Nyaya at least said that there can be uninstantiated jatis which they take God as their ashraya. Because the jatis don't depend on particulars, they don't depend, they depend on particulars for their instantiation, but not for their ontology. At least the old Nyaya. Navya Nyaya might be taking a different stance. And most of the things in Vaisheshika system, they are samanya vishesha. We find that in a khata is a samanya vishesha with a particular, kind of being inhering product parent. But there is, so with the old Nyaya at least, we have the samanya, we have the vishesha, and we have the samanya vishesha. Visheshas, they cannot exist on their own. Visheshas will be always inherent in nitya dravya. That is true. And so that is how I, respond to your second question. Of course, Navya and I may be taking a different kind of stand, but I repeat that in the Nyaya system, it is always, most of the things that we see, that this glass, this desk, this laptop, etc., they are samanya vishesha, because here, we find it's a combination of, particular and universal, but that particular, is not a vishesha, because vishesha for Vaisheshika will be very, very select few things. It is not that this table is not a vishesha, for the Vaisheshikas. And this table will be a state of affairs according to Practitus. Objects are substance, and that is why they cannot be composite, because as substance they have to be invariant across all possible worlds, across all variant combinations. So they themselves cannot vary. So that was the point of the Tractatus. So objects, it is a force of logic which makes a semantic force of logic that makes objects substances. That is, they cannot be composites. Upadhis, you're finding a problem with upadhis being imposed generality. Yes, of course, that's the term which I coined. But I can say that, many people like Karl Popper, even Professor P.K. Mukhopadhyay, they have been defining upadhi as an arbitrary or contingent or ad hoc mode of classifying a number of individuals under a seemingly general property. Seemingly general property. Names of the upadhis, you can always put a ka or a tva. Like, Bandiman or Parvatva, Neela Khanatva. There's nothing stopping you from putting a tva and a ka. But the thing is that they are not jatis because they are sakhanda. Most of the upadhis are sakhanda, if not all. And it shows that Bandimana Parvata, you can easily dislocate the Bandi from a Parvata and see somewhere else. The kind of immaculate blend of Banditva and Parvatatva that is there, has to be there for a jati. That is not present in the upadhis. But I do confess that imposed generality is not a phrase which is in total used. But the kind of explanations that are found in the important commentaries, this is the one, that it's the arbitrary mode of classification. And I think, about the continuity between early Wittgenstein and later Wittgenstein. I do think that, of course, there are certain parts of continuity, but when later Wittgenstein himself says that Tractarian theory, his own Tractarian theory was wrong when he took simplicity and complexity to be absolute. And simples can always be external and internal eruption. You can always have different modes of classification. Not only that, within one mode of classification, that percolated simple gets internally ruptured. So that is what makes a radical break or a radical new point of departure for later Wittgenstein, which cannot be glossed over. Thank you.
Now this paper is open for discussion, as we have only 5 minutes at our end. So may I request that 2 to 3 questions and very specific, and answers should be very specific. Please. Yeah. Please.
Professor Meenakshi Ray Mitra, thank you for presenting a very beautiful paper on a technical topic. I have one problem on your the statements on page 12 of your paper. I request you to kindly see page 12 of your paper. In that paper, you have stated like this. Russell explained that when we claim to define simple or logical atom as indefinable and unanalyzable or as terms of an atomic fact, what we are addressing is not the simple itself but the concept of simple, a concept which we are trying to understand as indivisible units of atomic relations. Then the next sentence follows. On the other hand, Wittgenstein would say that such pronouncements about the status of objects striving to describe how language relates to the world are virtually nonsensical and unstable.
Unstatable.
Unstable. This is how you explain. Here, my question is, you have stated a kind of opposition between what Russell said there in logical atomism and also on about from the top of Wittgenstein's position. Russell made it very clear in his while discussing his philosophy of logical atomism. In the very introduction, Russell said, "I have learned a lot from my student and friend Wittgenstein, my former student Wittgenstein, saying that I have learned these ideas of logical atomism from Wittgenstein's Tractatus." So when Russell made an exposition basing upon Tractatus, and now you are showing that there is a controversy between what Russell said and that of Tractatus of Wittgenstein, and how it is possible, I am not able to understand. Kindly make some clarification on this.
Thanks a lot for your question. You see, I think that, what Wittgenstein will be saying, that the mechanism, how language relates to reality, that can understand. That is, been old though, that logical form, pictorial form, these are shown, these are embodied in language, but they cannot be, you cannot describe, you cannot make statements to talk about logical form and, So, but this insight of unstatability, of showability, I think it is not present in Russell. Though logical atomism of both these philosophers have impressive similarities, but one vital distinction is this, and another vital distinction you could appreciate that well, Russell in second lecture, third lecture, don't remember, he was saying that, you see, an object or a particular can occur by itself. It doesn't have to be concatenated with other objects. This is a major discord between Tractarian, the logical atomism and Russellian one. And so about the showable and also other examples, like belief fact, Russell thinks that belief fact are irreducible kind of belief fact, they cannot be mapped. Then you see Russell admits properties, universals, which Wittgenstein doesn't. Russell talks about negative facts, general facts, which Wittgenstein doesn't. So these are the differences between both their versions of logical atomism. But my point here is this, that to talk about, to give a philosophical exposition of what logical form is, what pictorial form is, but objects are. You can write pages after pages on the simplicity of objects, but that does not make the objects complex. The objects will be simple, the object will be not describable. So simplicity can be made a problem philosophical discourse, and that philosophical discourse has to be discarded. You say that you read the practice and then you just throw it away. Russell wouldn't say so. Russell would say you could throw by philosophical logical atomism. So that perhaps marks a distinction between them.
Okay. So next question, please, sir. No.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
I was just wondering that in the debate between essentialism of Tractatus or Nyaya Visheshika and then later Wittgenstein debunking this essentialism, how would early Wittgenstein or later Wittgenstein will talk about a specific case, say boxing. Boxing we know is a game, and boxing is also practiced in street fights. Where it is not a game. It is that motive is just to thrash the other or even to kill the other with the feeling of enmity. So action of the same action, boxing as a game and then as a street fight. So how will Wittgenstein in both avatars will comment on it? Can we see some essentialism in one action but not in other?
See, this doesn't go against later Wittgenstein, because you could say that, as you're saying, that they are so different. You know, boxing is a game and boxing is a street fight. You know, I think the automobile lever analogy would be helpful here, because if you say that there is an apparent similarity of the configuration of the limbs, which can be extracted and displayed, look at this essence, the common essence between the two. Wittgenstein said, if you remember, that you know, PI 11 or 12, that if you look inside the automobile, all these projected levers, these are so much, each of them is so much absorbed in the specific mechanism that there is no point in, you know, kind of extracting the levers, the switch lever, the brake lever, the crank lever, and then displaying on the table, look, this is the essence in which all these levers function. That's the point of it. Similarly, when you're talking about essence shared between street fight boxing and game boxing, see, there is a common movement configuration, common configuration of limbs, and that we are going to display as essences. That is a fragmented fraudulence.
No, my focus here is on intention. In the game, the intention is not to kill the other, but in the fight, intention to kill is there. So can we say intention is essence?
No, because Wittgenstein said explicitly that what is the ontology of the intention? Just think about it. You know, is it a mental unit? Is it a series of mental units? Is it a kinesthetic sensation? If you take these, project these to be the essence of intention, that either a very, you know, kind of kinesthetic sensation or a particular image or a particular series of imagery, when you extract them, when you externalize them from the action, they themselves will not have any explanative power. This is actually the point of the next civics paper. You see, will or intention, extracted from the action will not have.
Because of paucity of time,
Sorry.
I think that many more questions are there. So due to the paucity of time, please don't take it otherwise. I think that we have outside provision for discussion. So thank you very much, ma'am, for your innovative and beautiful presentation. Now I will request the next presenter, Mr. Siddiqui Alambek from Rajgans University. And in this session, I also announce the name of the commentator, Dr. Inatri Royamikro. So, Mr. Siddiqui, please come. Please come. 15 minutes for presentation, 10 minutes for discussion, and commentators also 5 minutes.
Very good morning, very fine good morning. At the outset, I would like to thank Professor Pandey, respected Professor Pandey, and all the respected teachers, my teachers. I think all of my teachers, like teachers figure present here, and my friends, my colleagues from my own department and from other department also. In this paper, I have presented my thought in a reverse way. All my co-presenters here, they try to bring some similarities, or they try to show some similarities between Wittgenstein and some Indian philosophical issues in Indian philosophy, presupposing some dissimilarity between them. But in my paper, I will start with some similarity and then I will emphasize on some dissimilarity between some issues in Wittgenstein and Naive Buddhism. So, the title of my paper is The Concept of Agency, Early Wittgenstein vis-a-vis Naive. The concept of agency is already have been touched in various papers, like Professor Paneer in the subjectivity and the soul, and in the earlier session, all the earlier sessions, we have Shankar's concept of soul and the Wittgenstein conception of soul. Here we have much enriched discussion. So without wasting any time, all the paper, I will just mention some portion of my paper. Read out. I will read out. Wittgenstein limits himself to give only a very rough approximation of the notion of agent as a human being. He simply sketches that human being is a human body connected to the phenomenal will. That is, to the will that sets the human body in motion, the empirical wanting to act. In notebook, entry 21.7.60. Although the phrase human being appears in Proto-Tractatus and Tractatus, Wittgenstein makes no attempt to unpack this notion at all in this text, except for a very indirect indication to the idea of human body connected to the phenomenal will. In Tractatus 5.33541 and in Tractatus 5.631. In later entry, he writes, if I wrote a book, the world as I found it, I should also have therein to report on my body and say which members obey my will and which do not. Wittgenstein discussed relation of will to action in notebook also. Here, he, under the influence of Schopenhauer, states the fact that I will and action consist in my performance the action, not in my doing something else, which causes the action. So he concludes, willing is acting. He didn't want to differentiate action and will. Actually, he equates action and will. Wittgenstein willing something is not an internal event preceding another external event such as an action. There is no causal relationship between the will and the action. The act of the will is not the cause of the action, but is the action itself. Notebook, page number 87. Here, Wittgenstein also have some comments on subjectivity. Subjectivity, as we know, in Indian context, subjectivity always, the concept of subjectivity consists of the knowing subject or the knower as well as the doer. That means the jnata and the karta. So in Wittgenstein, we may find some different notion of subjectivity. First one is the thinking subject. He wrote about thinking subject in notebook. The thinking subject is surely mere an illusion, but the willing subject exists. If I will did not exist, if the will did not exist, neither would there be the center of the world, which we call then I, and which is the bearer of ethics. That is good and evil is essentially the I, not the world. Then the I is the deeply mysterious. Notebook, entry 5th August 1916. In notebook entries, here Wittgenstein draws a contrast between the notion of thinking subject and the willing subject. Actually, Wittgenstein find the notion of thinking subject and willing subject somehow problematic, and he make a distinction between willing subject and thinking subject. We have already established that the notion of thinking subject is that of an object-like non-object-like subject that can that is rejected by Wittgenstein in notebooks on the grounds that is part of self-stratifying approach. Wittgenstein conception of subject is not, it is not an object. Already we have some discussion in Professor Paneerselvam's paper that Wittgensteinian subject is not an object. It can be the transcendental or perspectival, but in my paper I rejected all the transcendental interpretation and the perspectival interpretation of the subject. I don't want to mention it here. Just I will mention some remarks from the notebook. In notebook, when Wittgenstein talks willing subject as condition, what we must have in mind is that the condition of ethics. Let us consider some entries in the notebook. That my will penetrates the world, that my will is good or evil. Therefore, the good and evil are somehow connected with meaning of the world. The world is given me. That is to say, my will enters into the world completely from outside as into something that is already there. As for what my will is, I don't know.